over 1,000 horsepower. You just saw it. The dyno test reveals all. Lake 1,000 horsepower. I know that was the goal,
right,
but you're not completely satisfied.
No, I wanted to put the small pulley on there and make some more power. You know, we had to stop short. But you know, fortunately, you know, Ben being the experienced EFI guy, he saw that little warning sign that was like, ooh, something's not quite right there. Not just the air-fuel ratio looked good, but wait, something's going on here with the fuel pressure drop. And that's when he recognized, okay, wait, this injector's staying open way too long. The ECU thinks it's putting in 1,200 pounds per hour of fuel, and the fuel flow meter says, no, you're at 600. Yeah. We're out of fuel pump. That's our limitation. So for the next Expo, we're going to come back and we'll pick up from that point when we got a bigger fuel pump, and we'll keep on progressing on. And then it's just a great spot, right? I think it was actually a perfect fitting end to what we're doing, because it's not about reaching one goal.
Right.
It's about the evolution and keep moving on, and you learn something every time you do it. So
absolutely. Well, great job by you guys. I know I had nothing to do with that effort. You guys worked your tails off, and you got a great result.
Right.
By the way, 400 horsepower from a Pro Charger.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah, let's bolt on this thing and find 400. Now, as you guys know, we've got another roundtable discussion. Mr. John Callies returns for the first time of this Engine Performance Expo. Welcome back, John, and Mark from Brodix, of course. Vic, who got drafted, he thought he was out of here.
I thought I was out.
You're not out, right? And Donny and Jaden, who work here at Straub and do a great job. We're going to talk a little bit about cylinder heads. Mm-hmm. I hear they're important.
They're really important, and there's been a lot of evolution, and it's kind of funny. I think right here, there's a lot of stories right here in terms of how do we get to where we are today. I think these four guys right here have a little bit of a story to tell, so I'm going to shut up. I want them to talk, and I want to just listen, right?
Yes, well, exactly. Welcome to my life.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So let's start off with Mark. Obviously, Brodix has been in the business for a long, long time, and really forcing forward that evolution of cylinder heads. As far back as I can remember, you guys have been one of the go-to names.
Correct. Well, with guys like Mr. Callies here, he's come in the past and helped develop. We rely on our engine builders to tell us what they're needing, and then we go to different engineers, different people. We have people in-house that work on it and develop new product.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
All I know is this. In 1987, my dad had his shop, and all of a sudden, we get this box. This big crate shows up, and it was the Pontiac cylinder heads. And I was a young kid at the time, but I still happened to look at the label, and I kind of knew Pontiac was in Michigan, and the shipping label said Mena, Arkansas. So there's a story there. Y'all finish it, because I didn't know the rest of the details, but I know there's a story there.
Mr. Callies is that one. So.
The JV, who is owner of Brodix, of course I knew about the cylinder heads, and the foundries in Detroit that Chevrolet was using were just horrible. And they were making sprinklers, as I read.
Yeah, they did.
Okay? So
I had to be one of the guys that water checked them.
Right.
A whole pallet of them.
Yeah. And so I said, okay, let's do a Pontiac head. And a fellow by the name of, on this particular Chevy head for NASCAR, Mike Kennedy, was the guy who did the port work. And then we took Mike's design and turned it into a cylinder head. Now, the funny thing was that we got done, got it in production, got it out there, was becoming successful, but what the racing community did is the first thing they did was take it and roll it and go from a 23 to an 18-degree head, because NASCAR didn't know how to measure it. And so they were putting an inch of weld, and I mean, it would take, I don't know how many heads got welded up, but it was a pile of them. And of course, my deal with NASCAR was we would not change the first design. And of course, I had given NASCAR a cylinder head that was the, quote, cylinder head. Well, at the Atlanta race, Rusty's car and Junior Johnson's car are right next to each other. I look over, and Junior's got Pontiac heads on it. Okay, and I'm going, well, that's pretty cool. Then about 1 o'clock, I get a deal that says, would John Callies come to the NASCAR trailer? That's all.
Words you don't want to hear about it.
So anyway, I go to the trailer and they have our original head, and they've got Junior Johnson's head right next to it, and the guy's pointing at the lower part of the ports,
Right.
and going, "What is that?" And I go, "What is what?" "Right there." I go, "What are you talking about?" So he reaches down and he points to how the lower port had been raised, and I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, you don't know anything about head castings." And he goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "That's core shift. I can't do anything about it." and I walked out the trailer, and I didn't get called back.
You're walking away thinking, please don't come in here.
Right.
Please don't come in here.
I know where some of those heads are still at.
Yeah.
Deck welded up.
Oh,
You
yeah.
do too.
Yeah.
So anyway, you had a lot of fun because Chevrolet and Ford, everybody was cheating with the heads.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, but you didn't want to be the one
Get caught.
to get
Yeah,
caught.
yeah.
Okay.
So for those who
Right.
don't know, explain why rolling it over
well, one year
helps.
Well, the one thing is when you have your valve angle, and the closer you can get the valve to being
Center of the
vertical
bore.
to the piston, the more power you're going to make. And this was another funny story. We had done a 4-cylinder head for the Super Duty, and I was making more per cubic inch power-wise than out of the V8. So John Lingenfelder, I sent him a pair of 4-cylinder heads. I said, put them on a V8. Of course, nothing matched, but
Yeah.
John made this thing, put it together, and we just made way more power than the V8 stuff. And I kind of got thinking that valve angle, and that's why we've gone from, 23 to 18 to 15 to 11. And the only thing on a V8 is once you keep on rolling it, how do you get the valvetrain in
Right.
and work right? And that's the most difficult thing. So, like you say, you do what the racer wants, but the problem is he gets this 11-degree head and then he goes, I don't
don't
know
get
how
rockers
to work.
We even went the other way in the beginning, in the early days. That stuff is
We
like.
try to add
we
more
could-
angle to it.
If Joe would have been here, we'd have had that here. Yeah, we went the other way. Like there's stuff down there where he still got that stuff back in the day
Yeah,
from when
yeah.
we did that.
Well, like I
Trying
said,
to
it
learn
was
which way we were going.
Yeah.
It was a fun deal, but I recognized through the 4-cylinder program what was really happening.
I've got one of my engines right now that it's actually mine, but it's at 7 and 7.
7 and 7.
7 and 7. 7 by 2 and 7 by 2.
So when you make
A
it,
multi-angle push rod?
No, it works. Believe it or not, it works.
No, I'm sure it works. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's a chore to make it work.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ran real good though.
Yeah.
so talk about that. When you make that move and you roll it over to get the better valve angle, what do you have to do?
Well, your rocker arm geometry, all that changes
Immensely.
drastically.
Well, when we make a cylinder head, the first thing we do is we send it to the rocker companies, and we have them look at it and tell them we want X amount of bolts in it. Find us places to put bolts. Where can you fit a bolt at? And they'll make a bar for it, and then that's how we machine the head.
Okay.
And then once we get that part done, we can have rockers for it. So when we come to market, we're ready to go with rockers as well.
And that was when we did the Pontiac, the Pro Stock head. And that was another story. The Pro Stock head, you'd take a Chevrolet head and you'd weld on it, and it took, and there were Iaconio and a few other people could do the work. But it only lasted it took you 2 months to do it, and it might last a couple of races. And
Barry
it was
Olson
broken.
did a ton of that
So,
stuff.
so that's when we did. Jeez, guys, I'm sorry.
It is live.
It happens. Everybody's got a phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, when we did the Pro Stock head, we rolled it over, and of course, at the time, our race team was the rod shop. So that's Butch Leal was the driver. So that's where it started. And what we did is we really changed Pro Stock racing, because all of a sudden anybody could buy the head, do your own port work, and all of a sudden be competitive. And it really changed Pro Stock.
Because you didn't have to weld it up anymore.
No.
Oh, the work that was involved in that stuff. Man, the work. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is
welding
we
on the
changed
decks
that,
and-
and really
Heat
made
treatment.
everybody could be competitive.
Yeah.
And
Talk
now-
about that a little bit, because I mean that's the thing. You say, okay, well, it's aluminum, right? That's one of the advantages, right? You can weld it up.
Now, when you weld that much, you lose the heat treat. You know what I mean?
Oh, you have to have a reheat treat, and then everything moves.
You're
and twists,
back
and
to
you remachine
straightening everything
Every
out.
time
God,
we-
Even the
always.
valve
Yeah.
cover, I mean,
Yeah.
everything.
And you see,
Everything.
even back then,
They'll twist.
Danny Jessel, I sent the head to Danny and said, we're going to use your rocker arms, so make bosses. So that all worked out great, except stuff would start to move, and pretty soon you're welding all these
Yeah.
bosses together.
so-
But that's an evolution. You don't know that going in. And the other thing was, and it was really my mistake when we did the water system, because the chambers were and the ports were so big that when we started testing the thing, you would lose in the quarter mile. You'd launch it and lose it, and all of a sudden you'd lose a couple of tenths. You were losing 50 horsepower in a run. Well, I had water not going across the top of the chamber right, and so I made tubes that you'd put in and come out the end, and it solved it. I mean, that did it. But you learn from that, and if you were going to do
But
that
you're
yet
modifying a part that much,
again,
everything changes.
Well,
you have to make adjustments
I
as
mean,
you go
just-
down the line.
And what's funny is, I think a story that to me is, when you would run back in the day at the dyno, a pro stock engine, you had to have 5 people in the dyno.
Watching all the,
And,
yeah.
and each one would get a gauge to watch.
Yep. Yep.
And of course, when you pull it, you go, "Whack!" And I mean, you didn't let it run at wide open throttle more than a half a second.
Yeah.
And then you go, "What'd you see? What'd you see?"
Right, yeah.
Yeah. We got to do the correct time to figure it out.
I mean, it was, when you look at how sophisticated we are today, it was just a riot, you know, when you look back.
Well, now development of cylinder head. Like, I can't imagine, we were talking about rubbing sticks together before, like the way you guys designed a cylinder head back then compared to the way you guys design a cylinder head now, where I'm sure you're just bringing it up on computers is like, what's our best chamber? Let's put it in. Let's, how does it,
We're
what's
still
the
old
process?
school.
Really?
We're still old school. A lot of our stuff we make out of wood first. A lot of our stuff we do hand development. And to this date, I cannot say that we brought a single head to market on the first try. We've always will develop it. We send it to 3 or 4 or 5 engine builders. We tell them to test it. Tell us what you like, what you don't like.
Work the bugs
and
out.
then we turn around and we make the next revision, until we're finally to a point that we're happy with it, and then we take it to market.
That's an interesting fact. He's still doing it the old school
Everything
method.
is still old school for us. We still build it by hand. Our pattern makers all in-house. Everybody's in-house, and we still do it the old school way.
Yes, I think one of the funny things is the first time I fly to Brodix, and I got a print. I get down with JV and I roll this print out, and JV said, "What's that?"
Well, one of the interesting facts, you talk about prints, still our blueprints at our foundry are all drawn on 4x8 sheets of plywood. Our pattern guy will draw it on the plywood, makes the part, and then when the part's finished, he'll put a new piece of plywood on, screw it down, cut the legs off, drop the table down, and the plywood's about that big.
How about that?
That's
So
cool.
it's still
cool.
old school, but with us having everything in-house, if Vic calls and says, "Hey, I see this in the block, something's happening here," we can go look at it, we can fix it, and the next day pour another one
That's
Machine
nice.
and
Yeah.
check it.
Change.
Yeah.
and make the change. So that's one thing that makes us unique with that, but it also slows us down to
There's
where
a price
we
for
can't
everything.
develop a new head in 30 days.
Right.
It's going to take us 6 months, 8 months to develop a head.
Right. I think
It's
back
tried and true, as I say.
Exactly. Well, when y'all were talking about how when you weld something up like that, the heat treat and everything goes, is that the reason why they used to drop valve seats? Like maybe just fall out of the engine?
But yeah, well, I mean, you're dealing with a press situation there. There's a lot of things that go on, but like,
I just remember
you know,
my dad made this comment about, I don't know, about 10 years ago. Logano and those guys were going out to the big Phoenix, you know,
Yeah,
the
5 mile.
the 5 mile deal, right? He's out riding, and he's taking pictures on his cell phone and texting the team
I've done about that.
about that, right?
Yeah.
And I told my dad about that, and he's like, "That just goes to show they haven't grown up in an era when you blew up engines all the time. Because there ain't no way, if you were driving a car in 1987, you were taking your hand off the wheel to have a phone in the car. Are you nuts?
McClure
Because
took me out
something's going to blow up.
to test out there, and the first time you go out and go around this 5 mile deal, and you're 200 miles an hour, and you're in one lane, right? And a little picket fence. It's like, oh, I'm going. Well, after about 500 miles, you're going, okay, get me a cup of coffee or something here. I'm rolling around this joint.
Well, that was like the 5 mile oval that
Yeah.
we had at the GM
Yeah.
test facility out there. It was designed so once
That's
you
where I
got,
went.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
once you get above 80, you can take your hands off.
Exactly.
I used to get people in the back seat. You got to take the wheel and go, how you think you're
Yeah.
going?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What was it, 80 to like 120
Yeah,
miles an
yeah.
hour? You didn't have to touch
Yeah,
anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So real quick, we've got Mark Cronquist is out there. He wants to say what's up to Vic.
Really?
He's
Hey,
watching.
Mark.
That's it.
He ought to be here.
He was.
He was here yesterday.
He was sitting right where you were. He was
should have
right
been here
where Jaden
yesterday.
was,
I know, we
actually.
just crossed paths.
But what about as much effort as you guys put into cylinder head, but once you hand it to these guys, like everybody seems to have their own secret sauce that they want to do to it. So almost you leave room for everybody to do their own thing.
We have what we call porter's castings. So we do everything from, we'll develop a cylinder head, say like this one here, that's fully ported,
Again,
ready
we're
to roll.
live.
I'm popular.
But it's fully ported, ready to go. Then we make a as cast copy of it for the budget guy that can't afford the CNC, and then we make the cylinder head as a porter's casting, so guys who have their own port shops or CNCs can put their own taste on it, and then, as I say, make their cookie taste different than everybody else's. And we have heads that we just do what we'll call cube it. We cut the ends of the intake face, exhaust face, leave the head bolts out, valves out, spring seats out, everything, and then they machine it how they want it.
Leave it
So-
in
Valve
rough.
location, angle, all
Yeah,
that.
so we can do that on everything except spec heads. No matter how much people offer us, we still won't do a spec head that way.
What are you looking at me for? You never caught me.
Back to the welding.
Let's change the subject.
Oh, and you, like you said something a while ago about seats falling out. Well, all right, say if Vic has a seat falls out, he ports a head too big, takes the ledge out from under, it doesn't have anything to sit on. We go in, we put more material in, we put a bigger seat in. Instead of fixing the problem, they say, oh, great, now we have more room to work with.
And then you go bigger. Seat fell out again.
So, Jaden, what are some of the things like here at Straub, like when you're going to work on a set of cylinder heads, like what are all the things that you have to do to a set of cylinder heads before it's like ready to go?
Like out the door together.
Yeah, sure.
I
Because
mean-
I've seen, by the way, Jaden's been here working the whole time.
Oh, yeah,
Kinda
yeah,
since we
yeah.
moved into the studio, Chris is like back to work.
Yep.
And he's been
Exactly.
working the whole time. People walking by, you've been working your tail off. But on cylinder heads, so what of it?
I mean, if it's something that we're starting new, I mean, me and Donnie will sit down and we got to figure out what the customer's doing, what's the engine size, all the specs. Then he gets to go in the room, work his magic, say a few words that people probably shouldn't hear. Then he gets it where he wants, and then it hands off to me. Starts the digitizing process on our EM69. Get it ported. We'll go through, fix our guides, valve job, play with our valve angles, get everything how we want it, and machine, and then we get to put it together and send it on out the door. But every single process has a checkpoint. You have to check everything about that, make sure everything's going to fit your application. Or if you're doing something general, I mean, you got to think of all the variables that go in.
So, Donnie, you're starting a port, intake and exhaust by hand,
Yep.
then flowing it, getting it what you want.
I get it where we're going, where we want to go, and I give it to him. And that's the thing. As long as I've been doing it, I'm like Vic, I've held a die grinder all my life, you know what I mean? So having the benefit of somebody like him
When you
from
get
the
done
other
with one
side of
port
the
and have to
world,
do the whole set.
yeah, it's like I'm in hog heaven right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, I can make one and he can
Yeah.
do the rest.
Fun part's
Not
over.
just
You
that,
do the
it's
rest
just
of grunt
being
work.
able, the CAD design, the whole thing. There's some, you know what I mean? There's a lot about it that's good. It's good. I've never had the opportunity to work with somebody close, even though I've been around the people I've been around, Kenny Weld and Lucido and all the people through the years. But like to be able to work with him, this guy can manipulate a machine like nobody I've ever seen, period. And I've seen some good stuff, you know what I mean?
Well, I get to be picky and you get to be picky.
Well, that's the thing, you know what I mean? I've got my standard, he's got his, and it all works together, you know what I mean? But to have the benefit of the two people, you know, it's a definite positive.
No, sounds like a pretty good team has been put together here.
Oh, exactly.
Right, the relationships. But, you know, like what I'm wondering is, like, this is where some of the voodoo magic still exists, right? Like those cylinder head porting guys, but back in the day, it seemed like there are shops like you're not allowed to even look in there, and it's almost like art, right? Is this art or is this science?
I remember back in the day when people would call the shop and it was an act of Congress to get something bought. Who sent you? Where you come from? Who's taking care of it? They treated it like children.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
But that's the talent of it, though. Like to be a talented cylinder head porter. My goodness.
There was some Pontiac cars that won a lot of races that.
They were stock.
I won't mention no names.
You can. It's okay.
No.
It's just
Second round, I
engine
got
people.
when I went to Childers was the second round. I was actually, you know, I told you I was just doing freelance doing cylinder heads, and I can't remember the team honestly, but I did a set of Pontiac cylinder heads for Cup team, and Bob, I keep talking, he was down there at Childers's. He said, "Hey, bring those heads by so I can look at those things before you take them to whoever it was." And so I did. I stopped in there, and it was about 5:30 in the afternoon, and he said, "I'm going to throw them on the flow bench." So he throws them up there. Well, Richard was there too. Well, he comes back there and looks. Well, these things smoked anything they were doing with that stage 5 head. He's like, Well, that next Monday, Bob said, "Hey, you want a job back there?"
You know, so you know, Keith Dorton was here yesterday, and so he got a story about his brother from Ronnie Shaver. So I don't know if you guys had done these heads or not, but you know, back in the day, in the pro stock days, obviously Lee Shepard was the man, right? So Shepard had done a set of 23-degree heads for Ronnie Shaver for sprint car stuff, and he said, "All right, here, I want you to try these things. I think it would be pretty good." All right. So Ronnie had them sitting on the desk, and I guess, you know, Randy Dorton was hunting around trying to find some power for the Hendrick deal, right? And he had called Lee, and he's like, "I don't have anything. I have one set that I made, and Ronnie Shaver has them." So Randy calls Ronnie up and says, "Hey, man, I hear you got these heads. How are they?" He said, I haven't run them yet. He said, "But I was supposed to be really good, man. They flowed really good, and I think it's going to be really nice." So I haven't had a chance to, you know, put the injectors in there yet. He's like, "Can you send them to me? I just need to borrow them."
Yeah,
I just need to borrow them for a little bit. I swear I'll send them back, but I'm struggling for some power. We're trying to go to Daytona. We need to qualify. And he said, "All right, okay, you know, I'll send them to you." So he sends them the heads, and those are the heads that Jeff Bodine won Daytona 500 with.
Okay.
Right. So then, Ronnie calls. I said, "Oh, my head's back," and he's like, "No, not getting his heads back." Said, we'll pay you for him, right? Well, Mr. H never paid Ronnie for him. Because, you know, it was kind of tight money back in the day, right? This is before he was a millionaire. So, but after a while, it's like most things, right? Became a running joke that Mr. H said, "You know, I'm never going to pay you for those cylinders." But it's one of those speed parts, right? It's one of those things. When you get that set of heads, that's really awesome. I mean, the other John Callies that worked for my dad, he ended up going to work for Robert Yates, and in '98 when Darrell won the championship, they said their open engines, they had one set of heads, and he rebuilt them every single race for all their intermediate track stuff. That was their head, and they ran it all the time. And he had to work like crazy. They said Robert would fly the heads back,
take them off the engine, fly them back.
First one, take them back.
You know, the funny thing is when you look back to, let's say, Cup in 69, 77. You were lucky to finish a race.
Oh, yeah.
If you think you know, usually about 5 cars made it the whole dang way. And today, it's rarely a failure.
Got a failure.
You know, and that's just tons of.
And back then they're turning what, 7,000 RPM, 6,500.
Yeah.
Now they can turn 9. for that long.
Well, yeah.
Well, and see, one of the things on the lifter thing, we have to test even today, the rollers to 11,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're not even close to it, but that's
What
the test.
That's the test. Yeah.
Got to go above and beyond.
Right.
So let's roll back, because people can buy cast iron heads still.
Mm-hmm.
They can still buy 5/64 rings too for some reason, right? But what was the impetus to go to the aluminum head? Now, was
Our
it
hands.
Pardon?
Our hands.
Yeah.
Wears out porting those things.
Oh, I know, the cast iron room, baby.
Yeah,
I mean,
nasty.
oh God, because as a kid, right, my
Yeah.
first job was pushing the broom in the shop,
Yeah.
and to go in the head porting room
Yeah.
was that you were going to be in there for an hour,
Yeah.
cleaning everything up. But it was never really clean.
No.
Well, you
Back in the
instantly
day,
did
the
two things. You
292s
got a
and the
weight
bow tie
advantage,
irons when it was
and
cast
you could
iron.
move things where you wanted
Yeah.
them. Right.
And repair.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Repair, that was probably the biggest part, right?
Yeah.
And did NASCAR, what was that story with NASCAR with that? Because I don't know the details back then, but I can't imagine they would say, oh yeah, aluminum, go right ahead, do that.
No, everything with NASCAR back then was a fight.
Yeah.
I mean,
It was a job.
just a
That's
battle.
how I'm thinking, right? That had to be a Herculean effort to say, we're going to get
Well-
rid of these iron heads and we're going to let you guys have aluminum heads. That's like,
Well, I
no,
think
that's
we-
against what they do.
Had to have a reason.
We
You know
were
what I
trying
mean?
to get our
You did.
867 head approved. That's when Bill Gazaway
Yep.
ran
Yep.
the deal. And so we were having a test at Blue Max. And so,
Raymond Beetle.
yeah, and so he brought in a set of heads that were all epoxied up, totally illegal. And I said, what's this? That's what we're running against. We're going to run that head against the Chevy head. And I said, and he said, and we're going to prove it makes more power, so we can't approve it. So Harold Elliott, we were just super guys. So we're in there, and we've got the Chevy heads on, and we run it. And back then, if you made 603 horsepower, it was a good piece. And so we're taking this thing apart to put these other heads on. So Harold, first of all, we took off 1.6, put back on 1.5 rockers.
Did everything to knock them down.
Everyone's looking at us, okay? So that's when you had the barometer on the wall. Remember that?
Yeah.
So I walked over and took about 4 turns out of it. Back. And so they run this thing up. And they run it up, and it made 565 horsepower. And they're just beside themselves. What did you guys do? You watched us.
Yeah,
These heads you did are a piece of crap, And so we finally got the heads approved, but it was
There was a lot of gray area
Oh,
for
yeah.
us.
Oh, absolutely.
It was back to the inspection process. It was always, cat and mouse game with the
Oh,
inspectors.
yes.
When
Walk in the
Bob
gray
Cronin, he passed away a few years ago. Him and my dad got to be really good friends. And Bob was a great guy. And when he was doing the Daytona prototype stuff, with Pontiac stuff, of course, NASCAR had this deal where or Grand Am, so whatever they were back then, right? Okay, this is how much power we wanted you to make, right? And if you made more than this, then we're going to start choking down the air intake restrictor on you. So I've been working with Bob on oil stuff, and we got down. They were racing in the 24-hour on 0-20 in like 2005. Of course, back then those guys were willing to kind of still 2050 was a lot of known people. So we went and got the worst non-friction modified 20W50 we could find, and said that was his oil he would put in the engine to take to NASCAR from the dyno.
So you remember the 391 Pontiac head?
Yeah, I welded in a few of them part numbers.
I was trying to say the 867, you get 391, and
Yeah.
did the same welding and all, but that seemed to be.
We still get those in for repair.
Do you really?
We get.
I wasn't going to mention those. I wasn't going to mention
Those little square part numbers,
plates.
little shop painting?
Yeah.
We get
You know
guys
what?
that
Nobody
You know
cheats.
what? I remember the very first ones that we did. I welded.
Yeah.
And we machined it with the mill, and I carved them out
You
by
carved them by
hand.
hand?
And, before we.
Then you got smart enough and said, hey, I can cut this out of this head.
Then we had the
In
plates.
mill, put it in this head, shop
Yeah.
paint it.
Right.
Golden.
Golden.
Those
We
guys
have
had
repairs
5
come
degrees
in.
of valve angle. Everybody else didn't. You know what I mean?
When we have these repairs come in, they always call us, I have got this 867 come out of Cup Country, and we want you to repair it. It's 23 degree, and you go, no, it's not. It's nothing like what that.
You want to keep them, but it's not.
Yeah.
You may think it is, but it ain't.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Great job as usual. Another roundtable in the books. Lake,
Sir.
These are great. You know, we should do one more at the end of the day.
I think we should.
I think we should, and I think we will. But right now, something you've alluded to several times over the course of the week, right? Finishes, surface finishes,
Right.
vital, very important.
Right, so we have a little video here from Mr. Callies at his shop talking about surface finish and why it's so important for valvetrain parts.
Hi, I'm John Callies with Renault Lifters, and we're on our next tech tip, which is roller finish on the roller of the lifter versus camshaft finish. Now, I've noticed there's been a lot of talk on the internet that with a fine finish on the roller and the cam, that it can skip around the camshaft. And with Hendrix Motorsports, we've done, believe me, a ton of tests, and that isn't true. So let's talk about it. One, this is just showing the different levels of lifters that we made. And I want to move on to show you, this is a finish on the needle bearing for Cup. And this is on the Black Mamba finish. Now this looks wider, it's just the way the picture was taken. Both the same length. Now finishes, this you'll find is a 1 or 2 RA. Now we now measure finishes in 3 different dimensions, but for the sake of not getting into that, I'll just use an RA finish. So we're trying to hit this 1 to 3, and this is Cup finish camshaft, and they're hitting the same thing, 1 to 3. But if you notice, they polished all the radiuses, and again, that's just so you don't get cycling, bending, cracks starting. But the finish, I mean, they're on top of it. So what we have found, now this is versus nobody runs flat tablets. We're just talking roller lifters. So there is no break-in period. As long as you have oil and film thickness between the 2 parts, you're riding on a film wedge. And these finishes increase the durability of the part. And of course now, last year we had to do, I believe it was 6 races, had to run the lifters twice. It's been increased to 17 races this year. And I'm assuming the next step after that is running more races, because they're trying to get the cost down of running the product. But I have found, no matter what you're working on, the finer the finish, the better the durability, the better the parts run. And doing this is not easy. This is an expensive proposition. But now we have crankshafts being done that way. Everything in the engine's polished. And there's a reason for that. And you have to consider it, what level of racing are you working with? If I have a street engine, I certainly don't want this rough, because if you look at a roller bearing, the highest load is at idle. So you, again, back to finish. So look at your camshaft. Every cam manufacturer has a polishing option. And believe me, it's important. And having the edges broke and polished, all is, that's why they can go sit, you know, if you look at, when I started in NASCAR in '69, if we had 6 engines finish the race, we were happy. Now they're making way more horsepower, and you rarely see a failure. And that's because of sound engineering. And so believe me, guys, if you know somebody at a cup shop, and we always hear you do, and you pick one item of what they're doing, that isn't going to help you. It's a list of items that make success. And to make 800 horsepower, go 750 miles on an open engine, pretty impressive. Anyway, guys, I hope this helps you see something. Thank you very much.
What a day, what a day, what a day. Yeah, my brain is swollen. I've learned so much today. They told us, don't start cars. We are not going to listen.